Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Pop Culture Piggies. Hope everyone's had a great week. Caleb, how you doing today?
Yeah, good. Last time we were on, we were going through something called Snowmageddon, and it's been nice the last 2 days. So things have kind of been little more relaxed, and also, I know Matt's not super into it, but I'm a big hockey guy, and Canada won the Four Nations tournament, which was really exciting. Every team was really good, though. I really thought America was going to win, but still our sport for now, and hopefully we can continue our success. But all jokes aside, it was a great tournament, and shout out to the other three nations because they have some killers on their teams, and I would not want to play hockey against them. It's funny because we're football fans, right? Can you imagine like a Four Nations, but it was just football, or like Olympics football in the Olympics, like American football, not soccer, but you know what I mean? I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
America would just win 500-0, eh?
yeah, they would score essentially every possession, if not every play. I don't even know how many non-Americans there are, like total in the NFL, but certainly not enough to field a competitive team. And that's if it was US versus the world. US versus, say, like a Canada. I mean, you're looking at maybe like 7 NFL players and then a handful of CFL players, I guess, would fill out the rest. So they would get absolutely demolished.
I feel like for the Pro Bowl, that'd be a good idea, like US versus the world. And it's like anyone who's from it, because they have people who are born in other countries, right? So I think that would be a kind of a cool tweak in the tournament. So we could talk
I
about
think
another
the
day.
NBA should do that because the NBA All-Star game is just completely shot. But the world, like doing an NBA Americans versus the world, could actually heighten things a little bit, and the world could very easily beat USA. I think in NBA.
I think the world would smoke the US. You have Jokic, Luca, you have Jamal, you have like it's the
Okay.
world. Like they have so many like pieces. I just think they would play too fast for this because I mean the US already has a hard time beating like Spain. Never mind other countries. And they've lost to Greece in the past and stuff like that. So like you're getting the best pieces from each team. It would be very interesting. But I think the
Yeah, but
world.
I think the thing about the Olympics that's a little different is those players have like so much experience playing together, which I do think is underrated in Olympic sports. But if you were just throwing like, hey, like Giannis, you're great, Luca, you're great, Jokic, you're great, but they don't have that chemistry. I do tend to think the world would win too. But I think that's what they gotta just we have to see it at this point. Nothing else is working for the All-Star game.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, last week I think we were talking about the Luca trade and how like it was such a kind of crazy situation. It's Luca's first game versus Dallas tonight. So
Yeah.
it's we're gonna see. I don't think I watched Stephen A. Smith earlier and first take, and they were saying they don't think he's gonna have a big game today. It's when he goes back to Dallas. I think is it March or April? One of the two. I know it's later. That's when they think he's going to have like a 55 plus point game and just cook him in front of the entire fan base.
Yeah, I do think he will try to get cooking tonight too. But I agree. Like I think when he goes back to Dallas, that's when he's gonna try to go off for 60
Yeah,
or like a 45-point triple double.
yeah,
And they're just gonna feed him like crazy. And also then Anthony Davis will be there. So there's gonna be even more motivation for Luca to kind of show up. But I'm excited to watch tonight. It's gonna be one of the first NBA games that I watch in full this year. I actually went to the Raptors Suns game on Sunday,
okay.
which
Did
was
we win?
fun.
We win.
Raptors won, yeah.
Okay, nice, nice.
Yeah. All the
Yeah,
Suns played too. The Suns are just a complete disgrace this year. Them and Philly are the two most disappointing teams. Just with the
you
amount
know,
they're paying their guys.
I feel bad because I used to be like so into basketball, and I just think I don't know. I think it was after the bubble year. After the bubble year, I kind of just like stopped having as much interest. I still love the NBA, but I mean, like when we won the championship and stuff like that, it was just insane. And obviously, the bubble was a very cool idea, regardless of what anybody wants to say about it. I loved the bubble like tournament during COVID. But everyone's different. Some people hated it, some people loved it.
I thought it was like a cool concept for sure. And at the end of the day, I mean, how can we complain when we're all stuck at home and like there's nothing going on to have sports to watch? The
Literally,
fact that they made it work was
yeah.
massive.
I thought it was sick, and I liked it. But we'll definitely have to kind of reconvene, next week regarding kind of this game and stuff, because I do think the Luka trade has, like, the trades that took place at the trade deadline have kind of, in a weird way, revitalized the NBA, because I kind of feel like the NBA was having a bit of a quieter season. It's been having a quieter season for the last couple of years. I think it's because LeBron, I like the NBA is very much like face of the league driven, and LeBron's been the face of the league since what, 2011, since Kobe won his last chip, because Kobe was the face. Let's be honest. LeBron was like an up and coming face, and mind you, but he hadn't won chips and stuff. So I think it's because the last couple of years LeBron's kind of been like in and out. They were in the play in one year and stuff like that. They're not like dominating. And so I think like a lot of the smaller market teams have been doing a lot better. So I think with this, it's been good. And I think a lot more eyes have been on because they're curious to see how the trades work out. But it's still
I think the biggest problem for the NBA right now is to your point on LeBron, like as he's getting older and like he's still great, but he's kind of phasing out of being the face. They just don't really have an American face of the league, which is hurting them in terms of ratings. And it's hurting just like the marketability, because all the top players right now are international players. So it's great for like international exposure, but for US, it's not super strong right now, and it's hurting the ratings pretty dramatically. And I do think a lot of it is because like the best US players, they're still great. Like you have someone like Jason Tatum or Ja Morant or Zion, but those guys even have their own, not Tatum, but the other guys have their own issues. And all these big marketable guys are from international countries. So it's still great to watch in the playoffs and whatnot, but yeah, the ratings are just kind of plummeting like crazy.
I agree too. I never really thought of it from that perspective, but I 100% agree that like one of the biggest challenges is they don't have that American face. And I think that part of the reason why, like, for example, you look at Zion and Ja, like they were meant to kind of be, a bit of a contentious thing, but they've had their controversies, and, obviously that's affected a lot of their playing style and them being on the court. And I think Tatum is a great ambassador for basketball. He's one of the best players in the world. I think the problem with Tatum is that there are times where he's not the best player on the court. It's Jaylen Brown. And I feel like they're both kind of just very quiet to themselves, which is no problem, by the way. Like, I don't think that's an issue. I just think that, like, from a marketability standpoint, they need that next big American star, and they have to build them up in a certain way. And I think they build Zion to be that guy, but Zion hasn't really panned out, unfortunately, in the NBA the way that they've built him. Because when he was at Duke, he was primetime television. So,
it's true. I mean, I'm excited to see how the rest of the season unfolds. And I mean, there's no football now, like baseball's around the corner, but I think like now is when I really start to hone in on basketball. We have a pretty exciting next couple weeks. Obviously, we have the Oscars coming up on Sunday, which is something we'll talk a lot more about next week and in the next couple weeks. But I know, football's a little colder now. But before we hopped on, you were mentioning you had been watching a few things over the last week since we last spoke. So love to hear. And just to kind of set the agenda for today, before we get into that, we got a little fun one today. It probably won't be super long, but because it's like pre-Oscars, post-Super Bowl, we thought it would be fun to let the audience know our favorite TV shows of all time. So we each put together a top 10 list. We're going to compare that to Rolling Stone's top 10 list and just kind of see if there's any similarities between the three of us, and let you guys know a little bit about what we're into. But before we get into all of that, let's hear what you've been watching over the last week.
Yeah, so it was funny because before we got on, we were both talking about it. We both watched The Last Showgirl with Pamela Anderson. And man, it was really good. Like I really was like, whoa, this is deep. Like I thought Pam Anderson was incredible in the role. It's weird that like my childhood crush is still like my two of my childhood crushes, Demi Moore and Pam Anderson, are killing it in their later years, which is inspiring in its own way because you know, wow, like someone I hope I can age as gracefully as they have. But in the sense of, they're still just, I mean, she really killed it. And it's not a fun watch where you go out there and you're like, oh, this is a movie that I'm going to watch and feel very uplifted from after. It's not an easy watch, but I do thoroughly enjoy it, and I thought all the performances were great. Kieran Shipka, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, and apologies if I mispronounced it. And even Brenda Song, I was like, Brenda Song's in this movie, what the hell? So it was, Billy Lord was great in it.
Jamie Lee Curtis.
Jamie Lee Curtis, exceptional in the movie, yeah, and even Dave Bautista. Dave Bautista, he's a big guy, and it's so cool to see how he's went from this wrestler to, in Guardians of the Galaxy to now, taking on these kind of dramatic roles. And he's got this like way about him where you see him and he's intimidating, but there's like a softness to him. And I thoroughly enjoy watching his, his performances whenever I get a chance to. But listen, it's not an easy watch. It's not like anything crazy or bad happens, or it's a malicious, kind of messed up movie where you see blood and it's not one of those hard watches.
It's not like The Substance at all.
The
performances are both great from like similar genre of actresses, but it's nothing like The Substance.
Yeah, it's nothing like it's something like that, but it's a hard watch in the sense that I think and this is what I took away from the movie. You have this person who sacrificed pretty much everything, including their relationship with their kid, to pursue kind of this I wouldn't say haphazard, but this dream that, in my opinion, was maybe not the greatest dream ever, but for them, it was everything. And so at times it could be frustrating because, to circle back to a movie that we watched, a movie like Dee Dee, where the mom, kind of gave everything up to have her kids and be a present mom. The opposite of that now, where you see a young lady kind of go off and have those kinds of things. So yeah, it was definitely interesting. But
yeah, there was one scene in that movie that really got me, where it was Pamela Anderson and her daughter, and the daughter basically asked her like, "Hey, was this all worth it? Like, was you chasing this like tiny glimmer of fame worth like us not having this relationship?" And like it was pretty heartbreaking. And I thought Pamela Anderson was great here, where like her response was really like, I thought I was doing what was best for both of us. And then there's a moment where Pamela Anderson looks in the crowd and she just wants to see her daughter there, and she sees her daughter there, but she's not really there.
Yeah.
And it just kind of like hits you. It's like, damn, like you can think you're doing the right thing, but it's like, it's just not. But sometimes you feel like you don't have another choice. And to me, like, I didn't know like Pamela Anderson really had like these acting chops. Like I feel like I haven't like seen her in much recently, and this was just the perfect role for her.
Well, I think your dog's a big fan too of Pam Anderson, funny enough. But that being said, I think what it also boils down to is, and by the way, don't worry, I got to speak for a couple minutes, so if you have to handle the pup, no issues. But I think one thing that's very important to like establish is with Pam Anderson, and this is, I don't mean to sound like disrespectful to one of the all-time greats, but to Pam Anderson, I think I always perceived Pam Anderson as someone who was this beautiful blonde bombshell, and she was kind of carried more by her looks versus her acting chops. Mind you, that's a lot of people in Hollywood. I'm not saying that that's wrong, but that was the way that I perceived her, and I haven't seen her in anything in a long, long, long time. So for me to kind of see her in this role, it was very, very, very impressive. I would say probably the hardest thing about the movie for me, and this is just my opinion, or like, the thing that kind of broke my heart was that the question kind of asks, like, at some point, right? Like, here's this person, they don't really have a plan B, right? They were a dancer. They don't really mention her age, but she's pushing the older 40s, 50s, maybe even
I think
60s.
she said she was 56.
Did she? I don't remember if she said how old she was, but either way, she's an elder woman and she's holding on to the past, right? The past, no matter what the case might be, whether she loved her job, hated it, she was holding on to the past. And it's just kind of one of those things where when I watch the movie in particular, you see her having these meltdowns because, she never made it. Now, the question is, looking back on her life, right? Is she deemed a failure? That's up to the audience, right? Because she did get to do something for 30 plus years that she loved doing. It came at a cost, though. And she didn't make it maybe in the necessary way that she thought she was going to make it. So where's the line start and stop? And these are the kinds of questions that I love asking after a movie like that. But it was definitely like not a very like it wasn't like a happy watch. Like after I felt inspired. It was definitely a harder watch. But it is a true story of a lot of people who do go through these kinds of things. A lot of artists go through these kinds of things where they neglect their family. They neglect whatever because they think they're doing the right thing because there's a chance of making it. And if they make it, then great. But what if you don't make it?
Yeah.
Well, and that's the thing.
Yeah, just like for every one like superstar, there's thousands of people, like struggling actors or musicians or dancers. So it's like you hear about the success stories, but the reason I really enjoyed this movie was like you see like the side of show business that isn't like publicized. Like you always hear about like these like rags to riches stories, but you don't hear about the stories from rags to rags over 30 years. And to your point, like this is the reality for a lot of people that are chasing a dream. And yeah, it's like it is kind of left up to interpretation whether like is her dream considered a failure or a success. I mean, throughout the movie, it leads you to believe that in her mind, like, she's starting to understand maybe it was a failure. Like maybe my life should have been different. Maybe I should have tried to force something in New York or go like chase like go chase Broadway. But she like is kind of thinking along those lines at certain points. But for like the viewers and for other people chasing dreams, like you can look at it as, hey, you did something for 30 years and this was your career. Like you might not have made $1 million. Like you might not be super rich and famous, but you succeeded in holding a job for 30 years, which a lot of people in show business give up. After a couple years of like struggling, they give up and they take an office job or they go back to school and do something different. But it is kind of left up to interpretation, which I think was kind of neat.
Yeah. And I also think too, like, and I don't want to hold too much on, because I know there's some other stuff that you've watched, but I also think one of the things it does is it kind of paints a picture of how the landscape of entertainment has changed, right? I mean, we're not really from a time where showgirls were a huge thing. I went to Vegas pretty recently. Like I mind you, but I wasn't actively looking to see a showgirl show.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas at a time, maybe for a long time, maybe 60s, 70s, 80s, maybe even 90s, even early 2000s, going to a showgirls kind of thing was a very Vegas thing to do. I feel like the landscape of Vegas has probably changed a bit. I'm not saying that there aren't showgirl shows. Of course there are. But I don't know if it's to the level of what it once was. And so it's definitely very humbling. As someone who's in the arts like myself, I can understand both aspects, but it's definitely like depending on who you are, it can either be an inspirational tale or a very cautionary tale, or a bit of both. So I hope whoever kind of watches it takes the time to watch it, because I think Pam Anderson's incredible in it, and I think she deserves a lot of credit.
Yeah, I honestly wish, like, part of me wish when I was watching it that the Oscars like bumped up the like best actor awards
Yeah,
from 4 to like 6, because
yeah,
I think she would have potentially had a shot if they added a few more slots.
yeah.
Um, and like certainly deserved, but the problem is with like only 4 spots open, it's pretty tough to crack that. So for a movie that's like kind of lower budget and not like super like not super marketed, like I'm not shocked she didn't get serious buzz, but wouldn't have been opposed to her getting a nod here at all.
Yeah, yeah. Do I think, for example, that she would have beaten like a Demi Moore? No. But do I think that she definitely deserves talk for one of the best performances of 2024? Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely. I mean, what have you been kind of watching aside from that? Because I know you're a little more of an active. I'm still watching Sex Education, so I'm on season
yeah,
4. I'll
nice,
be done that season by the time we meet next time, so I'll have a little more
sweet.
info, a little more of an opinion on that.
Yeah, we can kind of talk that through. I don't want to spoil anything for you.
Mhm.
um Oh, I've been watching a few TV shows. I know I mentioned last time White Lotus just started. So they just dropped episode 2 on Sunday. It's like very quickly climbing up like my all-time favorite list. And like in a couple years, I would not be shocked if it's on my top 10.
Mhm.
Spoiler alert for what's to come in a couple minutes, but it's not on my top 10 now. But I watched 2 new kind of shorter series over the last week. A TV show called Normal People. Have you heard of Normal People?
I have not. No.
It's a show. It's an Irish show. It's from 2022,
Oh, wait,
I
is
believe.
that with Paul Mescal and,
Yeah, yeah, and
okay, yeah, 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 sorry.
Daisy Edward
Yeah,
Jones.
yeah, 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 yeah. Okay, I know what you're talking about.
Very like it's kind of like a love story, kind of like teen to college kind of love story, but it's a lot more like emotional and a lot like deeper. The both the leads, it's basically like a forbidden love kind of thing,
Okay.
but it takes a lot of turns where these like 2 people, one of them is like a popular kind of jock, like kind of standard movie TV show, like jock falls in love with like the nerdier girl. One of the twists is like the nerdier girl is like super wealthy as well. And the jock is not. He's lower class. Um, but they keep their blossoming relationship a secret from all their friends for like status kind of purposes. And initially, like they're both okay with that, but it ends up having like lasting effects like into college. And then each episode is like a semester kind of. So it's like each
Mhm.
episode spans a few months. And it's like very, very emotional. And it's like these 2 people that do truly love each other, but they just can't really be together. And even when they get to a point where they're comfortable, like letting their friends know that they're together and family know, it's like they're so like damaged from the secretness of their relationship in the past that like they just don't really know how to be in a normal relationship. Um, Very good and sad show. Um, the other show I was watching was Apples Never Fall,
Okay. I
which
haven't seen
is
that one.
yeah, it's like a family mystery. It was okay, to be honest. The ending was a little disappointing, but the premise is essentially a really wealthy family has a really wealthy family has like a lot of like secrets within the family, and the mother of the family, who's like probably 70 or in her 60s, goes missing. And each episode is like centered around one person in the family to kind of give hints as to what happened to the mother. Where did she go? Is she alive? Did someone kill her? Um, and it's all kind of like building up to like what happened, and there's flashbacks and then present day stuff. Premise is really cool. The ending was just a little disappointing.
Mhm. And, because I'm curious, so far, season 3 of White Lotus, how have you, because I know that it's a show that has a lot of buzz. How
Yeah.
have you found it compared to the other seasons so far? And I know it hasn't gone through the whole, but so far, are you like very invested? Would you say it's one of the stronger starts to, because I know season 2, I did hear there was some contentiousness in the sense of like some fans were like season 1 was just such a groundbreaking show. Season 2 wasn't as good, but curious to hear your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think it started off really strong. I'm hearing some buzz online that people think it's like maybe a little bit slower.
Mhm.
Um, I think the biggest strength of White Lotus is they do such a great job with character development where you end episode 1 of each season, and each season is essentially a new ensemble. There's like a couple characters that are in multiple seasons, but for the most part, it's like it's not the main characters. The main characters are changing each season, and you end episode 1 of season 3 feeling like you know who these characters are and like what motivates them. Like there's still mysteries around their life, but you feel an attachment to them. So to me, season 3 hasn't lost a step. I do agree. I think season 1 was maybe a little stronger than season 2, but it's all super close. Like
Yeah.
they just do a really good job of not jumping the shark. I mean, it's only been 2.5 seasons right now, but yeah, to me, like they have the formula down pat, and it's like the
Mhm.
writing and the actors. Like they're getting actors from all walks of life, like literally all walks of life. Um, one of the actors in season 3 is like Lucius Malfoy from Harry Potter,
Okay.
and then like another one is like a someone from Thailand, which is where this season's filming, but it's like a pop star from Thailand who's never acted before.
Mhm.
And then they have like Parker Posey, who's like super famous over the last 30 years. They just get like all these like this like mismatch of people. They throw them on an island together, and it just worked somehow. Like Sydney
Yeah.
Sweeney was in it. Alexandra Daddario was in it. Steve Zahn. Like it's just like
Yeah.
it's
I'm pretty
crazy.
sure Amy from Sex Education's in it this
Yeah,
season.
Amy's
Yeah.
like in season
And
3, and
then
she's awesome in
Patrick
it.
Schwarzenegger's in it too.
Yeah,
That's Arnold's son, for those who don't know, which is
yeah.
insane because that is really cool to see. But what I will say is, with normal people, and I don't know why I forgot about normal people, but I watched a bit of it. I'm kind of guilty of if the show doesn't grip me right away, I'll usually fall off. That's my fault. I got to get better at that. But it did get great buzz, and I mean, I think it was like I know I don't want to miss, but I'm pretty sure that's the role that kind of got Paul Mescal, you know, kind of up there. Same with I think it's her Daisy. What's her full
Edgar
name?
Jones.
That's her fucking Daisy Edgar Jones. Yeah. So I saw Daisy Edgar Jones in Twister, and I was like, isn't that the girl from?
Mhm.
But
I
yeah.
saw her
So
in she was actually in Heretic. Have you seen Heretic
no, I
with the
haven't seen her. No, no,
Yeah,
no.
she was in that too. And when I was watching Normal People, I'm like, oh, this girl looks so familiar. And she was in that like horror movie Heretic with Hugh Grant,
Yeah,
which was
I heard good things
okay.
about Heretic. Actually, I gotta watch
Yeah, I
that.
thought it was okay, but I don't know. Maybe I'm just not into like the like religious horror.
Mhm.
Although I did like Sydney Sweeney's religious horror movie. I forget the name
Yeah,
of it.
there's diamonds in the rough everywhere, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of leads us to, I know we're talking about TV shows and stuff, but we were talking about this before and having to kind of construct a list for our top 10 TV shows of all time and kind of using, a big publication like the Rolling Stones. When you were going through the Rolling Stones list, because I went through it too, just kind of briefly, were you surprised at any of the rankings? Did you kind of be like, I see that, I see that, I see that, I see that? Or were you more like, I'm in complete disagreement with this. What the hell's going on?
It's so hard because like you're going through the list and like you're being reminded of all these shows that like maybe you watched or maybe you are just like well aware that they are like big like masterpiece shows and you haven't got around to watching it yet. So I can't say I was like overly shocked by much. Certainly like the stuff towards the top was like it made sense to me. Now my list is certainly not going to be the exact same. And to be blunt, to be transparent, like I haven't seen all the shows in the top 10 yet, and it's as I continue watching more and more shows, I want to knock off like all these shows that are like critically acclaimed. And I remember looking at the Rolling Stone list actually a couple years ago, and I wrote down all the shows that I've seen on the list, and I think it was like 40 of the 100. And then I said, like, all right, I want to watch more of these shows. And I think now I'm at like 50. So I'm getting there. It's just like, it's hard to watch shows. It takes a long time.
Those are a very big commitment. Here was my problem with the list. And I don't mean to sound like a freaking, a bit of a pest here, but my list does have some anime. Not a lot. It's only 2. And one of them is world renowned. Everyone knows it. It's not like it's like a shocker, but in terms of like, we're talking about the greatest shows of all time, the most influential, I'm just surprised that not a single animated show or anime show from Japan in particular cracked the list. I understand there's great shows in other countries too, but I'm talking about the grand scope of North American scale, if I'm going to call it that.
Yeah.
There's no denying the fandom behind some of these things, but that's probably where my list might differ from your list and obviously from the Rolling Stones list, because, I have some of that. I do have some of the deeper stuff in there, but are you able to present the Rolling Stones top 10?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we're gonna go through this, and we're just gonna say if we've seen it or not, what we think, if it's good, if we think it should be in the top 10, and then we're gonna share our top 10s, kind of explain why each one's on there. And then if for those who are watching, because I know this is live, if you have shows that you've seen or you agree with us or are like, absolutely not, what the hell are you talking about? Write it if you're watching this, if you are, and we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, sounds good. Let me just...
Also, they didn't include the Wiggles. Very disappointed. Classic show.
No Wiggles on there.
Yeah.
Give me a sec while I'm just trying to share my screen, but I think because I'm on a new computer, I need to give permission. So sorry about this.
I think I can, worst case scenario. Okay.
We should be good now. Yeah.
And we're only doing the top 10, by the way. So this list, for those who don't know, it was written by Alan Sepinwall in 2002. So shows have come out since then that, we might have seen that he might have not added to the list. So just be mindful that, if you are going to come for this guy, clearly he hasn't seen every show. But I don't think this guy's losing sleep over that. Let's see. I think Matt had to just step out for a second. Let's see. Let's just pull it up while Matt's getting loaded.
Sorry about that. Did you get kicked off there, or you got to stay on?
I think I got to stay on. I was just saying that you had gotten kicked off just very briefly.
Okay. Yeah, I had to maybe restart Chrome to share my screen. So sorry about that, dude.
That's okay.
All right. Now this should work.
If not, then I think I'm able to present.
Yeah. Rolling Stones. All right. Here we go. All right. Sorry again, but we are here. I'm just going to go to the top.
Yeah. And I was just saying while you were, if you click on the, on like the 30 or whatever, like 31, you can scroll from there.
Yeah.
So. because it won't let you slide for some reason, but that's okay. I was just saying, by the way, that this article was written in 2002, so some shows have come out since then that we might have on our list that he just.
You mean 22, right?
2022 is when this list is written. Yeah. So we're not going with a 2025 list. That's just because that was the last time the Rolling Stones, I believe, published this. But let's get to 10 because I already have the list up in front. And I'll be honest, I have not ever seen the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Have you?
Yeah, it's a little before our time, unfortunately.
Okay.
And this is probably one that I'm sure is quite good in its time, but it's probably also hard for us to find now. That might be the issue there. I've heard great things, like one of the OG comedy series sitcoms, but I'm sure it's great, but I have never seen one episode.
Yeah, I think that this was probably a pick where it was a classic show. A lot of the times I'll see the best TV show of all time. They'll put I Love Lucy. And it's not that I Love Lucy wasn't the biggest show at the time or that it wasn't revolutionary, but like, is it better than some of the other shows? Like, I'm going to go no, but I think it just gets a spot because it was the first. I don't know the other. I forget the rest of the list, to be honest with you. I just knew that number 10 was Mary Tyler Moore. Let's go to number 9.
Yeah.
Atlanta. Okay, so I haven't seen Atlanta. It's on my list, though. But I've heard really, really, really good things about Atlanta.
Yeah, Atlanta is definitely on my list as well. It's one that, like, I understand. I mean, it's been on since 2016, so it's a little longer. I don't know. Do you know if it's still on?
I thought they did their last season in 2023, but I could be way off, so don't quote me on that, everybody. But it's definitely it's definitely highly acclaimed. Everyone loves it, and I don't. It's on my list though. It is on my list.
Yeah.
It's coming up very short. I still have to see The Leftovers, so. There's
Leftovers I saw Leftovers was number 17 on this list, so it didn't crack the top 10, but it's close.
Yeah. So let's go to number 8. Okay, Cheers. I don't have Cheers. I've seen a lot of Cheers. I haven't seen it from like start to finish, but I've seen enough of it where I understand the plot and everything. It's a classic sitcom. I got to see the rest of the list. I don't know. As I said, it's a classic sitcom though. Have you seen Cheers from front to back, as I always say?
Yeah, so funny. I literally just finished watching Cheers probably 3 weeks ago. I had been watching it over the last year, 11 seasons, so quite a bit of episodes. I mean, there's over 200 episodes for sure, 20 minutes, so they're easy to watch, but it was just kind of something where, I mean, it's an 80s comedy. It holds up very well. I think it is definitely one of the best comedies that I've ever watched. That said, it's like not on my top 10 of all time for sure. And I think part of that is probably because like my top 10, a lot of them are things that I watched in real time. And at the end of the day, like I was born in 94. This ended in 93. I never watched an episode in real time. I thoroughly enjoyed watching it. And it is very funny, like great acting. A lot of stars came from it. So I'm a big Cheers fan. I would say if I was ranking top 10 comedies alone, it would probably be on there. But I understand why it's here at 8.
Sure. Okay, let's go to 7.
Number 7, we've got Mad Men.
So Mad Men, I'm guessing you've seen Mad Men. Have you seen?
I actually haven't.
Okay, so Mad Men
everyone tells me I should.
Yeah, Mad Men. I watched the first couple of episodes. Funny enough, 2 weeks ago. I still have to finish Mad Men. I do like it so far. I like the tone and the style so far. It's definitely like a classic television show in that sense, and I can see why it had such a big following. I got to finish it though before I can give my opinion on number 7. So far, it is good though.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I've heard great things. I heard the acting, it's like another acting masterpiece.
Yeah.
The Elizabeth Moss, I hear, is incredible in it. And then obviously John Hamm as well. But it's one of the top on my watch list right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Unsurprising.
Yeah. So this is in my top 10, but we'll circle back to that. I'm not even going to say more about it just because it's, I'll say why I think it's in the top 10 when I go to my list.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm excited to hear that. It's actually not in my top 10, but I will explain why when we get to mine as well. But it is an incredible, amazing TV show that really stands the test of time as well. Love Seinfeld, and it was close to making my top 10, I will say that. So Fleabag is... have you seen Fleabag?
I've watched Fleabag. I did. I was thinking of the other show. No, I watched Fleabag.
Yeah, so
I do not believe it should be in the top 10.
Well, I was going to say, like, Fleabag is like an incredible show. And I believe there's only 18 episodes too, which makes me surprised that it is in the top 5, let alone 10. Because like so many other shows just like had these long runs of epicness, and Fleabag was like definitely like a very fun binge. Like I think I watched it in like probably 10 days. And it is very good. And it is like one of those comedies that has a lot of like emotion and like depth to it. But to see it come in at number 5 is a little shocking, to be honest.
Yeah, let's see number 4.
This makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right. It's not in my top 10, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be in other people's top 10s. I have, like, for me, when I go over the shows, some of them are like master classes and whatever, but I wouldn't turn it on before I turn on the other 10 shows. That's why I put my list. So it's an exceptional show. Like I wouldn't, if this was number 1 even, I wouldn't be like, what the heck? I'd be like, okay, I get that.
Yeah. For me, it's like one of those shows that it's like, it's always going to be in like a Rolling Stones or a Variety top 10, because it is like, again, like a masterclass in acting. It's like very like it's a very like dark and like deep story. For me personally, like I struggled getting through the first season. I found it to be a little slow early on. And I know that's not the case throughout the duration of the series. And I do think it is like a very, very good series. But for me, like it's not in the top 10 either for my personal preference.
But I understand why people would have it in their top 10.
Oh, yeah.
There's no like argument for me. I just have 10 shows that I would put on before The Wire. That doesn't mean that The Wire is not maybe better than those shows, but I just prefer those shows over The Wire. That's all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the same with every other one here, by the way. It's just, yep. Yeah.
Yes.
That's we're going to get to that one. So
yeah, Breaking Bad, we'll definitely get to it a little more. This is, I think, probably the show for our generation. Like this was like the big show when we were in our
teens and stuff
and early 20s. So this one holds like a place for sure. And we'll get to that. Yeah, Simpsons is tough. Like it's not in my top 10. Like it's lasted 35 years at this point. Sorry?
It's not even in my top 30. Now, mind you, The Simpsons early seasons, and I'm one of those people, were so good. I just think it's just one of those shows that just, I think as the landscape of animated kind of adult content got more racier and better, I think The Simpsons had a hard time sticking the landing on some things because they always kind of played it safe. But the early seasons of The Simpsons I'll still go down saying they were some of the best for like comedy television. I thought they were hilarious. And the writer's room, if you look at pictures of that writer's room run by Conan and a bunch of the other guys, like they were incredibly written shows. But I would just say that because it's gone on too long and, so on and so forth, that's why it's, I think, taken a bit of a dud.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah,
think
for me, The Simpsons is like it's obviously great, and it's definitely one of the I would say it's one of the 10 most important shows of all
yeah,
time.
yeah.
Um, but to your point, like I think like for me, like the fact that I probably lost interest in The Simpsons 20 years ago or 15 years ago at this
Mhm.
point. Uh, it's hard for me to place it anywhere near my top 10 when I haven't watched half the seasons essentially,
Mhm.
almost half the seasons, and I just haven't cared in too long. I think number one, kind of obvious at this point, but
Yeah, let's scroll down just to Sopranos. So we're not going to talk about this one because it's in my list.
yeah.
And I don't know if it's in your list, but it's in my list. Um, so that was the Rolling Stones list, and the Rolling Stones actually it wasn't like a terrible list. Um, but do you want to go with your top 10 first, and then do you want me to go, or do you want me to go? What would be better for? Because
We can either do like one at a time, or we can do like
yeah,
each do 10, 10.
no, let's do one at a time, starting from 10. So your 10th favorite TV show of all time.
All right. Well, lucky for you, I have created a little presentation.
Okay. Oh, look at
These are
this.
not the shows, by the way. This is just a picture I pulled. My number 10 show of all time is
I hope it works.
Game of Thrones. Now, this was really hard for me because we've talked about it a bunch. The last two seasons of Game of Thrones really soured me a lot on the series, but when I'm like creating my top 10, I just couldn't erase like the epic that was Game of Thrones for 7, 8 years of my life. And it was just like the biggest show that I think we've ever seen, and we probably will ever we will ever see, or at least for the near future. Um, I was so hooked for so many years, and it was like you're waiting 2 years to find out what happens next, and you're like reading the books, and like you're so entrenched in this world of Game of Thrones that even though I was so upset about the end of the show, the fact that I'm still so invested in the universe of Game of Thrones, I had to put it at number 10, but I couldn't go higher than 10.
Okay. So for me, I was in really hard debates about this because you know how you left it at 10 because it was such a big part of your life, or not a big part, but like it was such a big, it was just as big, but the ending soured me so much that it's actually
Mm.
not my top 10. And that is why to me, like a lot of people have to realize, like it's even soured House of the Dragon for me because I just they have to whether they come back and fix. I don't know how they would, but the ending soured it so bad for me that it one of the greatest achievements in television is not in my top 10. It's in my top 20, not in my top 10. So
Yeah.
my top 10 is going to be very different to yours. My top 10 is a little show called Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z. Now, the reason why I have this show in here is because when we look at iconic television and iconic cartoons and animes, Dragon Ball Z was one of the first big shows to come out on a station called Toonami in America. And we had it on YTV, which is in Canada, but it would play on YTV Fridays. A new episode will come out at 8 p.m. every Friday. And in terms of show length, in terms of inspiration, you can see a lot of shows take notes from a show like Dragon Ball Z, especially in the animated universe and the anime universe. I think it really progressed a lot of that kind of genre into North American young kids, and you can see their passions and stuff now, and kind of how a lot of shows are molded and stuff. It's definitely not as dramatic as a Game of Thrones. It is an anime, keep in mind. But for me, Dragon Ball Z, not Dragon Ball Super or GT, Dragon Ball Z, and not Dragon Ball either. Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
That to me is in my top 10 just due to I based on three things: nostalgia, influence, and overall show and how they ended it for me. So that's just me. As I
Yeah.
said, I know our lists are going to be very different.
No, I like it. And hey, we both have dragons in our number 10.
Yeah, we
spot,
both have dragons in our number 10. We love dragons.
Let's hear your number 9.
Sure. So my number 9 is It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. So I'm a late It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia fan, but it is still going. It's super easy to watch. Each episode's like 20 minutes around there. And there's only 12 episodes a season. So super bingeable. And I just love, and it's funny because there's another show that they took a lot of inspiration from, which we'll get into. That's more down my list. But I love a show and a concept where it's the worst people ever and just kind of the shenanigans that they get up to. And it's a fake world, obviously, but I think that it's hilarious. They tackle a lot of current events in a very funny way. And also, to their credit, they actually have some very emotional parts in the show. And you see how really damaged these people are. So, for those who are looking for a very funny comedy that's very bingeable, I would say It's Always Sunny is a good take on that. Season 1 is a bit of a struggle, but I even like season 1. I don't hate it. So that's just me. What's your number 9?
Yeah, well, I will say about It's Always Sunny, it was something I considered. And I'm actually currently on midway through season 12 of It's Always Sunny. So I'm not up to completion on it. It's like similar to Cheers. It's like something I've been watching over like a year. And it's kind of like in bed, I'll watch an episode. I'm not like binging through it in a 2 months or whatever, but it's amazing. And it is one of the last remaining comedies where it's like truly unfiltered. Yep. So that is something I really like about it, because in like the kind of cancel culture era, like It's Always Sunny is not afraid to be canceled. Yeah. And I think that is like charming in a sense. Yeah. My number 9 is 6 Feet Under.
Okay.
And I don't believe you've watched 6 Feet Under, correct?
I actually started watching it.
Oh, you did? Okay, awesome. Yeah, so 6 Feet Under, it is like, to me, like the ultimate like family drama. It deals with the topic of death in every episode. It's like not the lightest show by any means, and you're seeing people die every episode. So if that's not something you're good with, like this is not the show for you. But it's like you're watching like these people, you're watching this family struggle, but then they're helping other families struggling with death. And it's like this very interesting dynamic where half the show is centered around death and then half is centered around life. And the rest of their life outside of death. So to me, it really is like the ultimate family drama. And I, to this day, think it's the best series finale that I've ever seen. So that to me was kind of the main reason I put it into my top 10, because I was debating a number of shows, and the series finale just really hitting was kind of the ultimate deciding factor here.
Well, it's funny because I've seen the season like the last 10 minutes because it's so iconic. And I remember watching it when I was a kid with my parents, because my parents are big 6 Feet Under fans. And so like I know how it ends, but I have to see kind of everything that led up to it. But it was a very beautifully done, and it's still talked about as one of the greatest finales ever. So yeah, there's no kind of shame in that end. What was your number 8?
Number 8, I've got Boy Meets World.
Okay. This is you know what? This is a good pull. I like this one.
So I was thinking like shows that really like shaped my childhood, as well as like just what I think is like the best shows. Now, do I think Boy Meets World is one of the 10 best shows of all time? No, I don't. I think it's a very fun and like cute show. But when I was growing up, like I had the biggest crush on Topanga. I loved Mr. Feeney. Like these characters like were very like transformative for me. So this was the number one kind of family type of show that I grew up on, and I had to have it in my top 10 for that reason.
Yeah. And by the way, we keep saying this, but this list is our favorite shows. They're not the greatest television shows of all time. That's a separate, because when we're looking at that, there's a couple of what I call little beats that people have to follow. But these are the shows that shaped us, that we love. So don't come for us too hard in the comments. It's funny. We talk about season finales. I think Boy Meets World is one of the greatest season finales of all time. I love this poll. I loved Boy Meets World growing up. We all had a crush on Topanga or Kelly Kapowski, even though that's Saved by the Bell. It was one of the two. So,
it's funny you bring up Saved by the Bell, because that was another one I was considering.
Mhm.
And I was looking at Saved by the Bell and Boy Meets World, and I'm thinking, you know what, like Saved by the Bell was a show that I grew up on, but to me, like Boy Meets World, like had a little bit more. It had a little bit more to it than just like a standard, like get home from school and watch a sitcom. Saved by the Bell was a little bit more like silly.
Mhm.
And don't get me wrong, there were serious parts of Saved by the Bell too. But I think Boy Meets World was like more about growing up. And to me, that resonated more with me than like Saved by the Bell, which was like a lot of like, it was like flirty and fun. And they would throw in some like an episode about like, hey, like don't smoke dope, or don't take caffeine pills. Boy Meets World like kind of flowed a little bit better than Saved by the Bell for me.
So for me, my number 8 is also a very family-friendly show. To me, it's the greatest sketch comedy show of all time. Revolutionized it to levels that I could never see. And no, it's not SNL. It is Chappelle Show. Chappelle Show, and the family-friendly comment was a joke, by the way. Do not watch that with your kids. But Chappelle Show, to me, is the greatest sketch comedy show of all time. It is the most iconic. I know SNL is more iconic, but I'm saying the characters from Chappelle Show to this day are still being referenced. And for me, growing up, I was a white suburban boy, so kind of being big into the BET stuff, 106 and Park. And I remember they would talk about Chappelle Show on that, and I was very much like, I got to see this. And my brothers, I have 2 older brothers, and we're far enough in age where one's, 5 years older and one's 3 years older. So when I was about 10 years old, I remember watching it on, I think it was Comedy Central, is when it was that's where it was airing. And it was just like revolutionary, and the characters and stuff, like looking back at it, it was just, I loved every sketch. They were hilarious. They were iconic. My brothers and I loved every second of it. And it just was one of those kinds of shows that for me created a lot of careers. Bill Burr was in it. Obviously Dave Chappelle, who's probably the biggest comedian arguably of all time in terms of stand-up comedy. It was his kind of love child. Darnell was in it. They had Charlie Murphy. They had all these great kind of comics, and it was just a very interesting time. Whether or not you love Kanye or hate Kanye, I'm pretty sure it was Kanye's first television show appearance too. So very interesting kind of little bit of history there. Did you ever get around to watching Chappelle Show back in the day?
I've definitely not seen it throughout, but it was like something where I would love watching, whether it's clips or YouTube or an episode here and there. I mean, I do think Dave Chappelle, very controversial figure, but also like one of the funniest people of our lifetime. So a lot of standouts from Chappelle. Obviously for kind of the reasons I mentioned, it's not on my top 10. Like everything on my top 10 is something I've watched every episode of, which makes sense. But it's awesome. And your 7?
My 7 is a show called BoJack Horseman. So BoJack Horseman is, to me, it really shows how animation and animated shows, or cartoons in particular, have really kind of become a lot more of a deeper thing than a show like The Simpsons, which it probably was intended to be, right? BoJack Horseman deals with mental health problems in a way that I have not seen a show do maybe ever. It articulates so much, and the main character of the show, BoJack, is this guy with so many problems. And the first season, and it's funny because they always talk about it, the first 6 episodes, very standard kind of cartoon funny, and then the next episode happens, and then it's 12 episodes, a season. And it completely takes the show from what you think it's going to be to something completely different. It changed the entire landscape of the show. And from that point on, it's not an easy watch at times. It could be a very hard watch, but the way that they cover emotional trauma, mental health, the pains of becoming famous, the pains of trying to make it back, forgiveness, regret, all of these things. It really does a good job of painting that. Have you ever gone around to BoJack Horseman?
Oh, I have, and BoJack Horseman is one of the like most surprising and like heartbreaking shows of all time. Like echo everything you're saying. It's like on the surface, if you told someone, like if a friend or family member walked by and saw you watching BoJack Horseman, they would think you are watching like the most like immature, childish show of all time. And the way that they mask like their deep messaging with these like funny cartoon characters is so smart. And it's honestly like it honestly is like if you look beyond the images on the screen and you listen to the words and the themes, it is like one of the most impactful shows you can watch. So
it did make your top 10, eh?
it did actually.
Oh, it did. Okay. So we're gonna circle back. I'm glad that because now I get to see yours. So your is 7. Buffy this is 7, right?
This is my 7. I'll touch a little bit more on BoJack. Obviously, we've touched a lot there. My number 7, another show that I recently just watched, but to me, like Buffy is a little bit of everything, and it also holds up very well now. And like certainly the action is not like what you would expect from like a 2025 action series. It is like a little bit more like cartoony in a sense, but it similarly to kind of what we've been talking about with other shows, it has a lot more to it than just like a hot girl killing vampires. Like there is way more. It gets very deep. There's a lot of like trauma involved. There's a lot of loss involved. And Buffy is like ahead of her time in the sense that like you see a lot in media now, like a kick-ass like woman protagonist, but let's be real, like in the late 90s and early 2000s, a lot of like female roles in media were like the love interest, and she is certainly a love interest here, but she holds a lot more power, and it's her character is really like what makes Buffy the show so great. And if you haven't watched Buffy, or if you've only seen it in parts, I would definitely highly recommend watching it all. It's worth it. There's a lot of episodes, but it's worth the watch. And it is also like a very, very good finale with one of my favorite lines in TV history in the finale.
Are you Team Spike or Team Angel?
I'm team neither. So something about me with a lot of stories where there's love triangles involved or relationships involved, I'm a fan of the lead, typically the woman, choosing to be with neither party. That, like, to me, that is like the most powerful like way to approach a love triangle, where it's like, hey, she realizes, and slight spoiler here, she realizes like I don't need either of these guys. And I like when shows and movies take that risk, and it's not just like, all right, we're gonna put the two main characters together at the end. Like, let's do something different. And I was team always. Buffy doesn't need either of these dudes.
I'm a fan of Team Spike. So sorry, the Buffy was your 6, right? Or that was your 7? 7. Okay. So what was your 6?
My 6 was BoJack.
Hey, okay. So we're
pretty close.
I didn't know you watched this show, so I'm surprised. I'm happy to see that.
Yeah, I mean, we touched on BoJack enough. I won't get too much into it. I will say another part of BoJack that like was so impactful for me was the last scene, and it's just the line where BoJack says, "Life's a bitch, and then you die," and then the response is sometimes life's a bitch and you live.
Yeah.
And that was like the final mess. I'm kind of getting shivers just saying it now. That was like the final message, and that was kind of the message of the show. It's like, you may go through shit. Like, everyone is going through shit. Life can suck, but you keep living. Like, sometimes like you don't, it's not life's a bitch and then you die. It's like, hey, like, your life can get better. All of our lives can get better. And like, super powerful there. But
you know, we talk about shows nailing the series finale. This was one of those shows that nailed the series finale. And so I'm not, like, I feel like we can do a whole separate episode on BoJack Horseman, which we can do that if people want us to, or if we want to, we can do that, because I could talk about BoJack for years and how it's changed a lot of my perspective, given me the dialogue to talk about certain things that I never thought to talk about. But I'm glad to see that we have both an affinity, because a lot of people didn't watch BoJack, and it upsets me because it's probably like, you know, I mean, we have it in our top 10, so I highly recommend it to everyone. My number 6 is Seinfeld. So Seinfeld, to me, is, when we're talking sitcoms, is the greatest sitcom of all time. I think that if you look at It's Always Sunny, they take a lot of beats from Seinfeld. You know, you have 4 characters. They're worse than the core 4, but the original bad core 4. And the reason why I'm in the minority where I like the series finale of Seinfeld. Spoiler alert, they go to jail in the end, because they did bad shit throughout the entire show and they had no repercussion, nothing. And it's kind of funny how they wound up in jail for something so stupid. And I love Seinfeld. I think it's, you know, classic. Mind you, I'm also a Jew, so I understand a lot of the kind of quirky humor that kind of goes around, like a lot of the Jewish stuff in Seinfeld. And the characters themselves are just iconic. You know what I mean? I don't think anyone can deny that. Even the side characters, like, you know, to me, the side characters in a show or a comedy are sometimes almost as important, if not more important, than the main characters. Whether It's Always Sunny, you have Cricket. In you know, in Seinfeld, you have what's his face, J. Peterman or whatever. You have, you know, George Steinbrenner. You have, you know, Jerry's uncle. You have all these like kind of weird, quirky characters, and they're all the lawyer. I mean, I can go on for days, and I don't want to butcher any of the names, but I just want to say that Seinfeld for me is my 6.
Yeah. I love Seinfeld. And again, I'll kind of explain why it's not in my top 10 in a little bit. But first, I will get to is this my 5? Yeah.
This would be 5. Yeah.
Yes, my 5, Dawson's Creek. We've talked over the last couple months about how we both are like very much into those like teen dramas. To me, this is my number 1 teen drama. A few others I considered. I really like Friday Night Lights. Like The OC I loved, but I wouldn't say it's the best show. Dawson's Creek is like what really like paved the way for my love of the teen drama genre. The thing I love most about it is they feel more like real people. Like they have real struggles, particularly the 3 non-Dawson characters, Joey, Jen, and Pacey, who to me are the stars of the show. Dawson is kind of like the straight and narrow guy. Not a big Dawson fan, but the other 3 leads are so complex. Dawson's Creek is also, they introduced a character, I believe in season 2, where his name's Jack, and was the first on-screen male kiss. So He plays a gay character on Dawson's Creek, struggling with his sexuality. There's like, this show deals with death. It deals with abuse and like many different forms of abuse. Some of the storylines are a little bit more far-fetched. I mean, we have like a teacher-student relationship, which is like a kind of like overdone trope in teen dramas. But for the most part, like Dawson's Creek is just like a iconic show where it manages to go into the college years without really missing a beat. And yeah, like if you're into teen dramas and you haven't checked out Dawson's Creek, like you really need to, because the work from Katie Holmes, Michelle Williams, and Josh Jackson, it's like second to none. It's like some of the best performances from teen dramas.
Got it. My number 5 is an anime called Cowboy Bebop. I know for sure you probably haven't seen it. It's a 26 episode show. It revolves around a space crew, and it revolves mainly around the main character of a gentleman by the name of Spike, who is a mix of Bruce Lee and kind of all these cool characters, but you can see a lot of his kung fu style and his fighting style. But it's a show that deals with very deep themes. And for me, it touched on a point where the protagonist, Spike, is just the coolest fucking guy ever. And he himself is... Every character is going through their own form of loss. And everything really kind of comes to a head. Once again, it's one of those shows that 5 episodes in, you're thinking, okay, there's, it's like an anime. And then once episode 5, I think it is, comes around and you kind of learn a little more about Spike's past, the show completely changes. And I don't want to spoil it because if anyone ever does want to watch it, the English dub is actually better than the original anime Japanese dub. So I would say you could watch it. It's really all over everywhere. 26 episodes and a very deep, deep, deep show. And we'll kind of leave it at that. My number 4 is the U.S. Office. Now, the U.S. Office for me is very important because Michael Scott is one of my favorite television characters of all time. Steve Carell did an exceptional job, but also just that kind of laugh track humor, the quirky characters. You really felt like you worked at Dunder Mifflin. And I love when a show can make you feel like you're a part of the show in kind of a weird fly on the wall way. Sometimes you're watching a show and then you actually connect with the characters. And I felt like, for me, The Office, I connected to every character on some kind of ground. Even when Michael Scott was being his stupidest, one of my favorite scenes in the entire show, and I don't know if you've seen the full Office, is when Michael goes to support Pam's art show. And he's the only one from the office that does. And yeah, he could be a dick and he could be, a little insensitive, but not because he's a bad guy. He just doesn't know any better. But at the end of the day, he still cares about every single one of his employees. And, it was such a touching moment in the show. And they have a lot of touching moments, actually. And I just love The Office. And that is my number 4.
Okay. Let's go to my number 4.
Breaking Bad. Okay.
Yeah, so we're at Breaking Bad. I mean, we touched on it a little bit as we were going through the Rolling Stone top 10. This was like a transformative show for sure. For our growing up in teen and 20s years. So this is just a complete masterclass show. The acting's incredible, the story's incredible. There's drama, there's comedy, there's action, there's scary moments. It's an awesome ride. And I mean, Walter White will kind of go down as one of the best characters of TV history, and rightfully so. I mean, I remember watching this guy on Malcolm in the Middle, and to see him go from that to Walter White, it's pretty remarkable. So Breaking Bad is definitely an awesome ride.
Got it. So that was your number 4.
Was that my 3 or 4?
That was your 4.
Okay.
Okay. And then what's your number 3?
My number 3 is South Park. Yeah, to me, South Park, what The Simpsons hasn't been, South Park has been for me. I am still obsessed with South Park. I can watch any season of South Park and be rolling on the floor laughing. I'll watch any of their specials. The universe of South Park holds up so much better for me than Simpsons. I think similar to what we were saying about It's Always Sunny, South Park is one of those rare exceptions where they cannot be canceled. They will offend anyone. I will laugh at them offending anyone. I'll laugh at them offending me. I think South Park is just so smart. And I think it truly is again, similar to BoJack in a way too, where you look at the screen and the things you're seeing seem so stupid, but the actual like way that the Trey Parker and Matt Stone create this universe and show, and the fact that they do it all in like a week span, like they're making these shows in a week, it's so impressive. And I will never be too old to find South Park funny.
My number 3 is South Park.
Is it?
It is South Park too. So by the way, me and Matt don't know each other's lists, so that's why we're kind of laughing at each other. So South Park is my 3rd for everything you said, and the fact that it completely revolutionized, in my opinion, what this once again art form could be. You have some of the stupidest, funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life. Like the fact that they made a side character, Lemmy-Winks, about a gerbil that was put in Mr. Slave's ass. And like it's still hilarious to this day. Or Towley, or the fact that Canada is one road, and it's like the stuff that even the Hell episodes. Like one of my favorite episodes is Satan's Sweet 16, and it's still to this day holds up. But it can also take a very serious turn, and they really kind of covered major events and things like depression and things like going through the motions and alcoholism. And so what's interesting about that show is they can have, as I said, the dumbest, stupidest concept of an episode, Man Bear Pig, followed up by Randy's drinking problem, followed up by Guitar Hero being an art form. You know what I mean? So it's every single time they come up with these like kind of interesting concepts, and South Park is my number 3 as well. My number 2 is Breaking Bad. So with Breaking Bad, I have it at number 2 because to me, it was the most compelling show that I had seen since my, for at least for the first kind of part of my life, my teens. And once again, for me, I'm a big believer in if you get the plane in the air, you got to land it properly. They didn't just land it properly. They knocked it out of the park. And once again, it's one of those shows where the main characters, like, Walter White's evil, we know that, but the side characters are all great. You have Jimmy McGill, you have, the Salamanca family, you have, Hank, you have all these characters, and it just blends in this way where each season it just gets raised. And for me, like, I'm maybe biased, but I love a good villain just as much as anyone. And I found that, for example, like Gustavo Fring, what a great villain. You know what I mean? Like one of the best. But then he's going up against one of the other great villains, Walter White. And so it's just this kind of cat and mouse game. And then it gets to the skinheads. And I don't want to ruin it for anyone who has not seen Breaking Bad, but that is my number 2.
Yeah, Breaking Bad. And the thing about the characters, like they literally had a whole spin-off with other characters from the show. And even in like all the duration of Better Call Saul, like you're still invested in these characters because like they're so strong.
Yeah.
Fring is like so much fun in Better Call Saul too. And Better Call Saul was one for me where I contemplated putting it in the top 10 too.
It's in my top 20.
Yeah.
I mean, Lalo Salamanca's like, we're not even going to get into that because that's like another deep dive kind of episode that we have to do. But
my number 2 is The Sopranos. And Sopranos to me, like if someone asked me what is the best show of all time, Sopranos would come in at number 1. And I think a lot of people would have that same mindset. It's like, it has like the crime aspect of Breaking Bad, and it has the family drama aspect of 6 Feet Under. It has a strong but controversial ending. You experience a lot of loss through Sopranos. There's a lot of humor through Sopranos. There's a lot of themes of mental health as well. I mean, basically the whole series is Tony Soprano in and out of therapy. And you're seeing this big bad mob boss have a soft side as well. And when he's not literally stomping people's heads into the ground, he is like sitting, talking to a therapist about his feelings and his family. It is such an incredible show. And it's a show that I want to go back and rewatch soon because it to me is just like a complete masterclass of writing, acting, storylines. It's really a perfect show.
Okay. And what is your number one?
My number one, my personal favorite, is Lost.
Okay.
So this to me was the show that this saved cable television for me. Like, this is one of the last shows that was not like a binging show. This was like right before Netflix boomed. This was a show where I would spend my weeks going on message boards. Like, some people watching this might not even know what a message board is. This was like pre-Reddit. Lost was the show where you would watch an episode and you would go on to message boards and go over thousands of people's theories about what the hell is going on here. This was a show that there was mysteries that made you think. There was topics of religion. Again, a lot of death in this show. But at the core of the show was the relationships between these strangers. And then kind of thoughts of like, are they really strangers? Like, why are they here? Why? And the island kind of serves as a bigger question. Like, why are they here? But why are we all here? And that is a theme throughout the show. So some people are unhappy with certain twists and turns that the show took and how the show ended. I get that. For me, the journey was so strong that any flaws that people may have with the ending, I don't care. It doesn't matter to me because the relationships and the experience of watching Lost will never be replicated. It's not possible in 2025 to replicate the experience that was Lost. This was, again, pre-social media or the early days of social media. And the community of Lost was so incredible that you didn't need social media to be part of the community. And for me, that's why it's number one. I've seen the whole show probably 7 or 8 times over, and I'll watch it again and again for as long as I live.
And my number one show of all time is one that, I think deserves its credit, but it is The Sopranos. So The Sopranos, to me, I agree with everything that you're saying. But the reason why I love The Sopranos is because every single character in that show is so well written. Every character is going through their own existential crisis, if you think about it. And obviously, I love like my favorite movies are, The Godfather and Godfather 1 and 2. And I love like mafia type stuff. And so for me, I know it's maybe not as realistic as the real life mafia, but I do love stories like that based in crime, but also based in absurdity and hilarity and things like that. The show is funny. It's dark. It's tender. It's heartbreaking at times. It's scary at times. And it really transports you into this kind of family, and you feel a part of Tony's crew. You know what I mean? Like, for me, every single member of Tony's crew is going through something. And you see that as the show kind of progresses on and on. Everyone's going through something deep and kind of going through. And I think one of the reasons why I like it so much is because there's so many theories. And we can talk about the finale, because I didn't like the finale when I first saw it. I was like, what the hell is this? But after going into the back end and kind of realizing why they did what they did, it kind of dates back to this line that was taken, and I've watched this, and I want to give credit to the creator who kind of made this theory. I am forgetting their name. I do apologize. It could be Sopranos theory. I don't know, and I apologize once again. But, they pulled a very interesting tidbit where Bobby Bacala says, Tony says, what do you think happens when you die? And Bobby Bacala says, honestly, I think it just fades to black. And the ending just fades to black. And so you can make up your own theory. I mean, mind you, David Chase has never come out and openly said he died or didn't die, and I don't think he ever will. But what a show and what an achievement in television, and really the first anti-hero that was big in television. So that was my top 10, and that was your top 10.
Yeah,
We had a lot
Tony,
of similar picks.
Tony Soprano, he paved the way for Walter White to exist.
Yes.
Like, there is no Walter White without Tony Soprano. So, and I say this as a little bit of a joke, but you know what? Maybe the reason I had Sopranos at 2 and Lost at 1 is there was a dog in Sopranos and a dog in Lost. They didn't kill the dog in Lost.
Yeah,
they killed the dog in Sopranos, so it bumps to 2.
I understand.
The dog lives in Lost, and the final scene of Lost, you see the dog. The dog closes the show out. So for me, that's enough. As a dog guy, you kill the dog, you don't get number 1.
You don't get number. I get it. I get it. It's, and a totally fair thing. But that being said, next week we have the Academy Awards, which we'll discuss then. We have Luca's game in 1 hour, so we'll probably discuss that as well, because that will be a big contentious talking point, of course. Before we kind of go, as always, for those who are watching, who have subscribed, subscribe, recommend to your friends if, this is the kind of stuff you like to watch. But if not, we're still going to do it because we're losers. We have nothing better to do. All jokes aside, though, thank you. And if you have any recommendations for shows that we missed, maybe we didn't announce them because we've seen them, but they're not in our top 10. We could always do an honorable mentions list, down the line as for if we want to extend that. But, Matt, is there anything you want to close off with?
No, I think this was good. I mean, definitely went longer than anticipated, but we probably didn't need to talk too much about the NBA. So apologies.
We'll timestamp everyone. Don't worry.
Yeah, next one will be shorter, and we'll break down the Oscars for you. But we'll look forward to it. And thanks again for hopping on.
Yeah, of course. Good seeing everyone, and have a good one. Okay. Cheers.